The ending scenario within The Last of Us Part 2 is certainly dramatic and visceral as an experience. However, as we look back on the previous 30 or so hours of gameplay and story, the ending doesn't feel quite as complete or satisfactory as it should. It feels a whole lot like a teaser for the next sequel, while also serving as a rapid conclusion to Ellie's emotional journey. That's not to say there isn't some change in them as a result of the ending, but it was Ellie's character arc in particular that was shortchanged by the result, more so than Abby. This ending has also been the subject of heavy analysis by both people who like and dislike the game. Most of the complaints from individuals who disliked it were centered around Ellie not killing Abby after everything that had happened. In their eyes, it seemed pointless. What is the point of leaving behind Dina to deal with Abby if you're just going to let her go in the end? While that is a perfectly logical question to pose in this situation, I do not think this is what hurts the ending. This is a subject which I briefly covered in my in-depth review of The Last of Us Part 2. I realized as I was making that video how much I truly had to say about the game's ending. Therefore, I decided to dedicate a separate video to the subject. It is within this video where I would like to posit an idea, which could add to the emotional depth and growth of both characters in the final chapter of Part 2's story. As I stated in my previous video, the themes of Part 2 are the inverse of the first game. Part 2 focuses on pain, suffering, trauma, and the emotional and psychological repercussions of loss. In that context, the story is trying to focus on some of the darker aspects of what it means to be human in an unforgiving world. When a story introduces a main theme or idea which is present throughout the narrative, it needs to have a payoff or resolution of some kind. It needs to have a progression from point A to point B. In this case, the characters needed to grow or learn something along the journey which directly relates to the struggle they've been enduring. For this particular case, what Part 2's ending needed more than anything was a moment of healing. Instead, it only tangentially touches on the idea. As I began my trek to reach Abby in the final Santa Barbara sequence of Part 2, I thought about the many interesting ideas which this sequence could set up. As it stands within the game, Ellie decides to cut Abby loose and fight her in the bloodiest of fashions before ultimately just letting go of everything. Seeing the reality of the constant cycle of violence which the two characters have set in motion, she decides to break the cycle and allow Abby to leave. As Abby departs for paths unknown, though probably in search of the Fireflies, we see Ellie sitting in the water, taking everything in. The scene cuts to the farm where Ellie has returned from her long and weary trek home. Dina has moved on, probably back to Jackson. Although the two are at odds now, we don't know what the future holds for them. Ellie has a moment of reflection, while she holds Joel's guitar, unable to play the tune he once taught her with her missing fingers. It can be inferred that, as she looks back upon the last memory of Joel from the night before he died, she is able to finally cope with his passing and move on from it. She leaves the guitar behind in the farm as she travels onward. As I said previously, what The Last of Us Part 2 needed more than anything was a moment of healing. While I'm not claiming the following proposal is the only way to achieve what I'm talking about, or even the best way, what I am suggesting is that it's at least one way the story could have come together in a way that feels like proper closure on this chapter of The Last of Us. Let us suppose an ending were to exist which played exactly the same as the one we have now, except for the beach sequence where Ellie eventually finds and confronts Abby. As Ellie descends down to the beach, she discovers Abby suffering and succumbing to her wounds for the torture and treatment she endured from the Rattlers. Lev awakens, having been stirred by Ellie's arrival. Though very weak, Lev manages to utter Abby's name. Ellie cuts Abby down from the pole. Abby is unable to move or even stand up. It is clear she doesn't have long. Ellie is taken aback by the sight of her target lying on the ground, already dying. Her revenge has been taken from her by forces outside of her control. But instead of being angry at the sight, She somehow seems almost sad. Abby points to Lev and manages to utter the word, "Please." Ellie doesn't know what to do or even say. This was not how she pictured this happening in her head. Every thought she had was one of violence and hatred toward Abby before she arrived. But now, she doesn't even know what to think. Ellie slowly walks over to Lev and cuts Lev down from the pole. Lev crawls over to Abby. In tears, Lev says, "Abby, please get up." There's a pause before Lev reasserts, "Abby, get up." Some tears begin to stream from Lev's eyes. Ellie is in shock as she remembers her own pleas for Joel to get up before he died. Ellie steps a little closer to both Abby and Lev. A few moments later, Abby passes in Lev's embrace. Ellie witnesses Lev cradle Abby with arms wrapped around her as she lay dead. In this moment, Ellie actually finds pity for both Abby and Lev. She understands this feeling better than most. She sits down on the ground near Lev and Abby's lifeless body. She leans against the pole and tosses her gun to the side. The scene then cuts to the farm and plays out much like the original, except that Lev accompanies Ellie into the house. The flashback still happens as Ellie holds the guitar, reminiscing about Joel. Once she begins to leave the room, Ellie turns back and looks at the guitar. The scene once again plays out the same as the original Part 2 scene, but as Ellie leaves the farm, Lev follows behind her. Both have found peace. With this ending, a new cycle has begun. Like father, like daughter. As Joel was there to help Ellie, Ellie will be there to help Lev. Ellie doesn't want to see Lev succumb to the same hatred and grief which drove her and Abby to the breaking point. Ellie is able to have a moment of healing. She's able to break the cycle of violence. She's able to move on and find new direction. Ellie has taken a step forward through that healing, and is even willing to take care of Abby's ward, the young Lev. This shows us players growth in her character. I think ideas like this one showcase how, despite even some of the story's plot problems or objective flaws, the ending could have been salvaged. Many times, if a game's ending really sticks the landing, players can be more forgiving of some of its faults. Ironically, by having this type of ending scenario, it would have actually fit even better with all of the duality stuff they'd been setting up throughout the narrative. I understand there are many who like the way the game ended. I understand there are many who dislike the way this game ended. There are even others who were outright furious that Ellie didn't kill Abby. Personally, I think it would have been far more potent and impactful if Ellie had witnessed the person she felt the most hate toward dying just as she arrived to face her. Ellie finds herself pitying Abby and sympathizing with Lev's emotional reaction to Abby's passing. However, as stated earlier, this is only one idea of how the ending could have been improved to fit the rest of the story more appropriately. There are many concepts which could work given the setup the game provides, so feel free to let me know what you all think in the comments section down below. Or you could even mention an idea or scenario which you would have preferred for the ending. Either way, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, clicking the like button, and hitting that little bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any new videos as soon as they drop. Thanks again, and have yourself a great day.